are going to ask you to pause your recording in just a moment and take a moment to look at the photo or the picture that you see on your screen. And as you look at it, we want to ask you to jot down, what do you notice about this scene and what are you wondering about? So there's no right or wrong answers here. The exercise is really just to see, as you take a look at this scene, what do you notice and what do you wonder about? You can go ahead and pause the video now. So it's likely, if you take a moment and you kind of share with the people sitting around you, it's likely that when you take a look at this scene, everyone is going to notice and wonder about different things. For example, one of my colleagues who has a sweet tooth will naturally focus on the little girl in the middle of the photo who's holding an ice cream cone. When we share this illustration or this scene with educators across the country right now, we're recording this during the time of the COVID-19 pandemic, folks are prone to notice and point out that these students are not practicing social distancing during this day on the beach. So what we notice about this illustration is going to depend on our life experiences and the particular context that we're all in when we take a look at it. What we've gone through looking at this illustration and the variety of different data points in this illustration that we chose to focus in on really parallels and mirrors the natural process that we go through when we look at any type of data set, like the data that we're here to explore today about our students. Today, before we dive into the data, we wanted to introduce a mental model or a framework called the ladder of inference. And this mental model or this framework was really popularized by the author Peter Senge in the popular book, The Fifth Discipline. We find it a really, really helpful tool because it helps us understand and then become more metacognizant about the process that we all naturally go through when we encounter data. So in this image, if you take a look at the bottom of your screen, you're going to see the grass on the bottom that really symbolizes or represents the innumerable data points that we come into contact with as we navigate the world and go throughout our day-to-day lives. So there's really more data that we encounter in our lives than we can really focus on or make meaning of. And so because there's so much data in our environments and because we have to process it in order to protect ourselves from physical harm, we all go through a very natural process. And the first step in that process, you'll see at the bottom of the ladder, is we begin to filter and select which data we're going to focus on and pay attention to. From there, we go about making meaning of that data, drawing conclusions, updating our beliefs, and taking action. So as we climb this ladder of inference, we're moving from inquiry, where we're noticing things and we're wondering, to advocacy, where we're actually taking action based on beliefs that we hold. And once we update our belief systems and we take action, we're that much more likely to notice other data in our environment that reinforces what we've decided is true. So that's why you see that green arrow there representing this cyclical process or this loop that causes us to notice data that reinforces our existing beliefs. And so that's why it's so important for us as we first dive into this data to be aware that this process is happening naturally in the background. And it's a process that is very effective at preventing us from getting into physical harm. It's a natural process. But we want to be more aware of it because we can be prone to bias if we climb this metaphorical ladder too quickly. So if you find yourself experiencing a fast climb as you start to work with your data today, you might rely on a few questions, and let's just take a few seconds to read some of those questions here. So you might ask yourself about why you're focusing on or filtering to pay the most attention to the data point that you have on hand, what assumptions might be at play, and whether or not those assumptions are really supported by facts that you have. And you might wonder, would different assumptions create different feelings for you that might lead to different beliefs? As you work with your data, you'll want to aim to use language like I notice, I wonder, and also to explore a range of reasons why the data says what it says. You'll also want to be mindful of those absolute statements. So language like always and never is often a helpful indication that we might be experiencing too fast to climb up the ladder of inference, and we might need to take a step back. You also want to become aware and cognizant of the natural tendency that we have to undermine or sort of discredit the data that we have at hand if it comes into tension with our pre-existing beliefs. So if you find yourself wanting to set aside your data or sort of invalidate your data, that might be a good indication that you want to step back down that ladder of inference and really explore why you're filtering on the data the way that you are and what assumptions might be operating in the background.